Today, nearly 9 million people live in London. Close to 40% of them were born outside the UK, and if you stand on any given street corner, you can hear a dozen of the city's 300 different languages spoken in minutes. But rewind 2,000 years, and none of this is here. You'd find a tidal river cutting through a marsh. It was completely useless to anyone, until 4 Roman legions arrived in 43 AD and needed a place to build a bridge. They quickly threw together a bustling port town, but it barely lasted a generation. 17 years after its founding, Queen Boudica of the Iceni tribe marched her army into the settlement and burned it to the ground. Dig under modern London today, and you will still find a layer of red ash. The Romans rebuilt, throwing up massive stone walls to protect their trading post, but by 410 AD, the empire collapsed. The legions pulled out, trade networks vanished, and a city of 50,000 people dwindled down to a few hundred squatters scavenging the ruins. By every normal historical metric, London should have died right there as a forgotten Roman ruin. Instead, the geography of the Thames proved too valuable to stay empty. Each total erasure forced the city to restart expansion from zero. Take the Saxons. When they settled the area in the late 7th century, they actually avoided the old Roman city. One poet called the ruins the work of giants, viewing them as cursed. So they built an entirely new trading town about a mile to the west. That worked well enough until the 800s, when Viking raiders sailed up the Thames and repeatedly sacked the town. King Alfred the Great realized the open settlement was indefensible. He forced everyone to abandon their homes, move back inside those ancient Roman walls, and recut the defensive ditches. Fast forward to 1066. William the Conqueror arrives, and he doesn't trust this heavily fortified population. He drops a 90-foot-high stone fortress right on the city's edge, the Tower of London, to oppress the locals and remind them who was in charge. 3 centuries later, ships pull into the docks carrying rats infected with the Black Death. Within 2 years, up to half of London's population is dead. Mass graves rapidly fill the fields outside the city walls. Yet again, catastrophe created an opening. With half the workforce gone, labor was suddenly scarce. The surviving commoners realized they held the cards. They marched on London demanding fair wages, and powerful merchant guilds emerged, eventually forcing the king to negotiate directly with the city's tradesmen. As the population rebounded, 17th-century Londoners built almost entirely with timber and dried straw. They packed their houses tightly together, with upper floors overhanging narrow, cramped streets. Almost every room had an open fire. The entire city was a tinderbox. In 1665, the plague returned, suffocating the city and killing 100,000 people. The very next year, in September 1666, a spark in a Pudding Lane bakery caught a strong summer wind. The dense wooden overhangs acted like a matchbook. 4 days later, 85% of the walled city was gone. 13,000 houses and 87 churches burned to ash. But the reconstruction forced a massive physical upgrade. New regulations required brick and stone. Structures like the iconic St. Paul's Cathedral rose from the debris. This stone-built permanence allowed the city to evolve into the administrative and financial capital of a global empire. Rebuilding in brick made the city's center resistant enough to host the massive trading houses, insurance markets, and banks required to manage a global network. But this relentless growth compressed extraordinary wealth and desperate poverty into the exact same space. While the elite lived comfortably, the massive working class was crammed into East End slums, where contaminated water repeatedly wiped out entire neighborhoods with cholera. By fixing its core in stone, London created the stability needed for its merchants to conquer global markets. But this same industrial expansion forced the city to confront the new, modern threat of industrial-scale disease. The immense wealth of the Victorian era couldn't shield the city from the 20th century. Between September 1940 and May 1941, the war arrived directly over the capital. German bombers hit London night after night. They leveled entire neighborhoods, damaged or destroyed 1 million buildings, and killed tens of thousands of civilians. When the smoke finally cleared, the city of the 1950s was broke and exhausted. Basic goods were strictly rationed, and thick industrial smog settled in, killing 12,000 people in a single 5-day stretch in 1952. With the empire dissolving and its traditional economy in ruins, London reached a breaking point. Survival now required the city to fundamentally pivot away from its old colonial identity and find a new reason to exist. Facing a massive labor shortage and a ruined physical infrastructure, the city looked outward. Beginning with the Windrush generation arriving from the Caribbean in 1948, London opened its doors to waves of immigrants from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and beyond. This demographic shift triggered a cultural explosion. By the 1960s, the bombed-out streets became ground zero for global music and fashion, while immense brutalist concrete towers rose to replace the rubble of the Blitz. By the 1980s, the city's old imperial shipping docks sat abandoned, so London pivoted again, redeveloping those empty docklands into Canary Wharf and creating a booming global financial sector from scratch. You can see this continuous adaptation in the skyline today. Hyper-modern glass and steel towers violently crowd against traditional stone buildings. It's controversial, messy, and constantly debated. London functions through a 2,000-year cycle, where every fire, plague, and bomb acts as a catalyst. By forcing a constant influx of new people, new languages, and new ideas, these catastrophes have turned a Roman marsh into an indestructible global metropolis.